Good evening and welcome to Wednesday. I hope everyone has had a wonderful month or so. Please excuse the technical difficulties. There have been some internet issues here in Toronto, but I am here regardless to welcome you to Rask Toronto Centre. We are online tonight, slightly later than usual, back after about a month, and I am Dr. Elena Hyde, the second Vice President of the Rask Toronto Centre. This is, in fact, and you just have to check the calendars twice, already October. Can you believe it? October 2022, and this is our Speakers Night presentation. This is one of two types of gatherings that we have online these days, not at the Ontario Science Centre due to the pandemic. And later on tonight, our President Tom Luton will be talking about our various programs. But first and foremost, we do have a couple things to kick off. So, as we're getting started here tonight, I like to take a moment to acknowledge that the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada, Toronto Centre, meets on the traditional territories of many Indigenous nations, including the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat, the Mississaugas of Credit First Nation, and other Anishinaabe peoples. These lands are part of the Dish with One Spoon Treaty and are now home to many diverse First Nation, Inuit, Métis, and Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. As we engage in astronomy here online, I suppose, we respect, learn from, and honor the deep relationship between the Indigenous peoples, the sky, and the earth. So That all being the case, I do have another wonderful thing to tell you as our start of our meeting. We actually have a speaker tonight, Jaba Adams, astronomer, programmer, teacher, and all kinds of other interesting things. He's actually done machine learning and specialized in virtual reality, done mobile games as well as physics, and has been an intermittent lifelong amateur astronomer, as have many of us here at Rask Toronto Centre. Recently, he's actually come back to school for a part time undergraduate BS in biophysics, physics, and biology, sort of smushed together at York University. He studied computer engineering at University of Toronto and has been interested in astronomy for quite a while. So he's actually come with a really great story for us, not just about computing and programming, but also astronomy, amateur astronomy, and I think, some pretty cool tools. I heard a rumor that maybe even a Raspberry Pi. So always looking and learning and going forward is a wonderful theme for tonight. And, of course, persevering in the face of technical errors doesn't hurt either. So, our speaker has a very dynamic program lined up for us. And without any further ado, Jabba, thank you so much for coming tonight. So, please take it and us up, up, and away.
Well, thank you, Elena, for the thank you for the kind introduction. Um, yeah, it's very exciting to be here, and I guess we should just take it away. So, uh, as I find get my cursor to the correct window here. Hmm. There we go. So this is just about me, but I think we can skip this uh, after that. Just wonderful introduction. So yeah, this is me with my first telescope, and I think, as you'll find out, my only telescope. Actually, this thing has we've co-traveled. So looking through old photos in preparation for this talk, I think this is Christmas 1987. We weren't totally able to establish it, but back in the days when one actually had to develop film photographs, I think we took these photographs to be developed in early 1988. And there's a little, actually, I should not assume that you can see my cursor, but in the bottom right of these photos, you see a little nutcracker, which is maybe a hint that it's Christmas. So on the left is my letter to Santa, and I suppose I won't say any more about that. And zoomed in at the top is the specific item. I had seen this in a Black's photography nearby and fallen in love with it. And I think I assumed that it was maybe a couple of $100. I found out later that I was quite wrong, and I'm really thankful to my parents for getting it for me anyway, with some help from my grandfather. So yeah, this is about a 4.25 inch telescope. In looking this up, I was thinking that it's a catadioptric, but maybe someone might correct me on that. In any case, what we see here, you see this wonderful mount. Um, this is an equatorial mount, and I'll just talk a bit more about that in a sec. Okay. So I realize, of course, you can't read this Wikipedia page down here. I just put it there for context. But what's an equatorial mount? This is a stock photo um, of essentially the same telescope. So I no longer have this mount, as we'll see momentarily. Um, so it's a bit of a trick getting a clear picture of it, but this looks to be essentially the same one that was on my telescope. The counterweight actually looks a bit bigger. That's about it. So it's solving a specific problem, right? Which is that when we look at the sky appears to be moving. I mean specifically looking at stars at night. Now, why? Well, the Earth is rotating, right? So if you look up, you are gradually facing different directions relative to the let's call them the background stars. They're so far away that they seem to not move relative to one another. I mean, if they're truly stars. I should be careful here not to say things that aren't precisely true. Some of the more knowledgeable astronomers in the audience might caveat those. But the point is that as we observe, the Earth is rotating and stars appear to move through our field of view. The higher the magnification, the more it's as though you're looking kind of through a straw, and the harder it is to keep an object in view. So, for instance, with my telescope looking at Jupiter, I might, using like a 12.5 millimeter lens objective, I could center this rickety thing on Jupiter, and it could be moving slowly out of frame. It would transit the frame, like kind of if you imagine my hand here is Jupiter, and then gradually it moves out of the frame. So what the equatorial mount does, it allows you to do these fine adjustments. First of all, you have to align it. You align it. There's a procedure to essentially align it on the pole star, so it's parallel to the axis of rotation of the Earth. And then these two little knobby things on springs, with some other adjustments, will allow you to just kind of slowly rotate these knobs, and it keeps the whole telescope moves, and it keeps the object you're tracking in view. I remember distinctly wanting, so this is back in late 80s, a motor control to do that. I already felt that, this is not something that a human should be doing. It annoyed me. But with that technology at that time, that was quite expensive. Okay, so just a little note here. I don't know, those with kids or younger siblings might have heard the question driving in the car, hey, why is the moon following us? I just thought that was an interesting relationship there. It's actually quite hard to explain to somebody fairly small that in fact the moon looks like it's following us because it's not following us, but the trees zooming by are giving that impression. Anyway, so this is an equatorial mount, very fancy. This is not an equatorial mount. So what happened? This telescope really followed me everywhere I have lived. I guess for the last, what is that? Quick math, almost 35 years. So, unfortunately, though, the box gave out last year, and the mount gave out, I think, about 3 years ago. It didn't survive. So I jury rigged this thing. Now, I'm sure many of you at home have much fancier mounts than this, and you can see some obvious problems. But what's interesting to me about this is that after literally years of thinking, wow, I should really either replace or build a mount for the telescope and get out there, get observing again, I just did this in one evening. Now, I'm sure many of you will say, well, yes, it clearly looks like you did this in one evening. And that's true, but it actually got me out and observing again. I should say, in the interim, I had tried to just kind of hold the telescope between my knees and kind of look up at the sky. It didn't work very well. I suppose, like, I think I might have been able to sight in on the moon, but anything else was jiggling and bouncing around too much. Okay, so we've listed some advantages. Built in one evening, no pre-planning. Uh, it's pretty rickety. So touching this causes the image to jump around, to vibrate. Um, it's also hungry for eyeballs. What do I mean by that? Well, I'm not sure if you can see from here, but this is a Frankenstein contraption where I've built this wooden thing onto a film, like a camera tripod. And the way the tripod works is that, yeah, you can tilt it up, but it actually wants to go up. So the way this is balanced right now, the way the weights are balanced, there is no counterweight like that nice equatorial mount. This thing, if I unscrew it, just wants to fall backwards and aim vertically. Now this little thing on top is the spotting scope. By the way, it's a terrible spotting scope, but I do find myself occasionally putting my eye right at the tip of that silvery, actually where the black is at the end of the spotting scope. Now, if I unscrew the telescope enough to adjust it, the mount rather, that conveniently, or rather inconveniently sized spotting scope wants to go right into the orbit of my eye. And it did, in fact, not once, but twice, I'm afraid. I'm ashamed to admit. The first time, it kind of hit me in the eye, punched me in the eye, and I thought, well, okay, I better be careful. I always need my hand behind this thing to brace it. The second time, I was with my young daughter, and I was just rolling around on the ground saying, is my eye still in? Is my eye still in? But luckily it was So safety glasses or some kind of glasses are required for this mount. That's a little downside. Um, okay, so why didn't I do a bit more planning? Well, I kind of did. I did a lot of planning, but life has a way of getting in the way. This is on the left. We have this telescope tube, same telescope in 2015, and I was trying to take many photos from many different angles so that I could use a technique called photogrammetry, whereby you can actually stitch together these images and get a 3D model. I thought, look, I'm going to do this right. I am going to make a 3D model and I will import it into a CAD program, a computer aided design program, and I will build in 3D a new mount for this. Just like an engineer. Um, the capture didn't work very well. And then later in 2015, I had a stroke. A bunch of things happened. Don't worry, everyone's fine. Um, and so here we come to 2018, where I again was trying to take photos from multiple angles. I had marked it up with tape to try and get better results from the photogrammetry, and I put a grid underneath. Still didn't work. No observing. Okay, so there's something powerful about just being able to go out and do something. With your hands, get it done. Version zero. Of course, it depends what you're doing, right? So really, I have a lot about this, or I made a video about this, and that's actually, I think, what kind of started the ball rolling on this invitation to give this talk. But I am prone to analysis paralysis, so this was really a way to seize the day. Um, as workers, as parents, I mean, I try to explain this to my kids that like you will never have as much free time again as you have right now. I mean, unless you start a startup and win the jackpot or something like that. Uh, this last note, memento mori, well, it's perhaps a bit of a downer. Um, but I'm actually getting to the age where people that I know and have known are not retiring. They're actually no longer with us. I mean, in a few cases, just unexpectedly. So I don't know. If you've got something you wanted to do, if you've got some project you've always wanted to work on, something you've always wanted to learn, some place you've wanted to go, maybe prioritize that. You never know. Okay, enough about that. Um, I'm going to get to the computing in a moment, but let's just continue this theme of anti-perfection for a moment. And I think so. I am not a very, very experienced amateur astronomer. I have mostly backyard and city street experience. But a couple of years ago, I thought, look, I really want to go to a dark sky area and see what I can see. I mean, I miss having gone to Northern Ontario a couple of times and having such beautifully clear skies as opposed to my typical downtown Toronto skies. But what's funny is this anti-perfection seems to be working for me for observing locations as well, because I apologize for the wall of text here. But these are the places where I've had wonderful observations. That's the first bullet point with all the sub bullet points. So, for instance, I used to regularly as a kid look at Jupiter, through the window of my closed window. I mean, not blind strong, but in winter. These are not ideal conditions, right? You can imagine multiple reflections from multiple panes of glass. I was just happy. I was seeing Jupiter. Like how cool is that? So from the backyard, from a schoolyard, with the baseball diamond lights still on in downtown Toronto. I mean, this gets to kind of like there's a similar argument in photography, right? You don't necessarily have to buy the fanciest camera because you take photos with the camera you've got. And to the extent that you have a camera with you at all times, you will take more photographs. And if you take more photographs, you can't help but take some good ones. Um, Last summer, I spent a lot of time looking at Jupiter. Actually, it was just due south, essentially, maybe 30, 45 degrees up in the sky. And when I finally decided to go to the Torrance Barrens Dark Sky Preserve, which is about a couple of hours drive outside of Toronto, I mean, it's wonderful that we have this resource. I checked the observing conditions. They were not going to be that great, but it said, partially cloudy. So not having that much experience with this, I thought, well, there'll be patches of sky with no clouds, and there'll be patches of sky with clouds, and we'll just make the best of it. It turns out there were mostly mosquitoes, actually, and I think they were thick enough, maybe, that I didn't actually have to worry about the clouds. So I went on a Canada Day weekend. It was over 30 degrees Celsius. It turns out one of the things that makes the Torrance Barrens Dark Sky Preserve so nice is that there are all these wonderful rock outcroppings. So real kind of, I assume Canadian Shield, but wonderful outcroppings. You can find a flat spot. You can set up a campsite. You can set up your telescope if you're not camping. The only problem is what is between these outcroppings. It turns out it's swamp. So in 30-degree humid weather, after multiple rainfalls, I was trying to do astronomy in a swamp. So needless to say, we gave up after about, I don't know, half an hour. Yeah, it was mostly mosquitoes. So, you can find wonderful and interesting things to look at from where you are, and the more you try, the more likely you'll be to see something. Okay. This is a bit of a jump. So my most of my training and most of my time spent is talking to computers. Um, I got that rush early on of having a system, finding this machine that will just do what you tell it to do. I mean, this is a blessing and a curse. So the first time as a kid or as a new programmer, the first time you get that computer to do something that you thought of and that you told it to do, whether it's just printing your name in a loop 100 times or printing something else that I won't say here. Um, that moment of control, of bending to your will, this device, that it's an amazing feeling, really. Um, I like to think of programming languages as, there's an idea that this is how you tell a computer what to do. There's an idea that this is difficult. Well, kind of, but a programming language is a compromise because computers are still really dumb. I mean, I'm saying this in 2022. They seem to be getting rapidly smarter, but they will do what you tell them to do and really exactly what you tell them to do. So one of the challenges is learning how to program computers is to tell them what you meant to tell them to do because they can't really guess that yet, although that is starting to change actually. So yeah, computer languages are made up languages that we make up or computer scientists make up that are simple enough for a computer to understand, but not so brutal that no humans can understand them. So we're meeting in the middle. So the question comes up, well, which language should I learn if I want to do stuff? This is a fraught topic. It's the start of many so-called flame wars. Um, use what works. Use what you need to do for the project you want to do. But having said that, you know what? Start with Python. There's so much there that already works. There's so many what are called libraries. Um, there's a slogan that Python comes with batteries included. So you'll be able to find code examples. You'll be able to find bits of code that you don't have to write, that somebody else has already written for you, um, to do all kinds of things. I personally came from a C background. I first learned C and then C++. Um, just a note here, because I have done game development, I would say that if you learn C sharp now, you can also do game development in the Unity game engine, if that's something you're interested in. If you learn C++, you can do the same with the Unreal Engine, which are kind of the two main game engines the two main toolkits that people use to write computer games these days. But other than that, it doesn't really matter. I would say start with Python. Um, one important difference here is that some of these languages require you to manage resources manually. So C++ and C would be in that category. People think, oh, C sharp's just the same as C++. It's not actually because it will do a lot of resource, what's called memory management for you. You can basically do something with a programmatic object, and you don't have to clean it up afterwards. The system will clean it up for you. C and C++ typically do not. You have to manually, if you use something, you have to later on remember to free it, and that can be kind of not as trivial as it sounds. Okay, um, JavaScript, PHP, all of these things are fine, but I would just say, one thing: please don't get stuck thinking you have to. Oh, I just see a message in my chat. I'm just going to take a look at that. I see. We have a question in the chat. So, you know what? Yeah, if you have questions, go ahead and ask, and I'll try to answer them in line. Is there an argument to be made for learning something like MIT Scratch first? Okay. I'm being notified that we do questions at the end, so I believe there's someone who will be managing the questions. That is a good question. So let's put a pin in that. I'll move along, and then we'll circle back to that at the end. Okay. Um, yeah, this is the problem with asserting that you should learn this language or that language. But I would mostly say that, you know what, learn by doing. Don't feel that you have to follow a prescriptive, like a set of steps. I mean, this is how we learned in previous times, just copying from a book. Whereas now you might copy from something called Stack Overflow, a website like that. I mean, we started copying as well, literally from paper books where you just type in the code. You want to eventually progress beyond that to be doing things intentionally, whereas you form the intention and are able to express that in code, as opposed to just copying and pasting things. But there's no shame in starting there. That's typically how people learn. Okay. I realize I'm talking a bit about programming without talking too much about what you might do with it as amateur astronomers, which we'll get to. Just one more thing I want to mention is that uh, regardless of language specifics, there is a craft to it, right? One could call it a craft. One could perhaps aspirationally call it software engineering. There's a famous quote to the effect that if civil engineers built bridges the way software engineers write software, the first woodpecker to come along would destroy civilization. Um, I don't have an attribution for that. Probably butchered it, but you get the idea. So there is a craft to programming, and don't worry that you have to learn all this, but I can recommend these two books helped me. This Code Complete is getting really old at this point, but it helped me with just the things to do to construct your code. But I would say if you can only read one of these, The Pragmatic Programmer, whether you are into computer science, computer engineering, whether you're just like, look, I don't care. I just want to tell the computer to do some things. I don't even want to be a programmer. I would say still check this out because
Oh, thanks everyone for bearing with us. It is the night of technical difficulties here in Toronto. And a huge thanks again to our speaker, Jaba, for trying their best here with the bad internet connections. And I absolutely love this learn by doing sort of just do it astronomy style that you're going for here. And we will probably try to reschedule our speaker to give you all a real proper speaker's night with a full talk that doesn't get interrupted. In the meantime, we're going to go ahead and have a couple questions that have come in. It's just to kind of round off this particular presentation. Emma, are you there? Do you want to do questions?
Yep, we're good.
All right, then I passing to Emma.
Great. So the first question we got comes in from Toronto PvP. Is there an argument to be made for learning something like MIT Scratch first?
I think there's nothing wrong with that. It's been a while since I've looked at Scratch, so I was certainly very interested in it. I guess it depends what your goals are. Like on the one hand, if the goal is simply to learn programming and have fun while doing it, then like use whatever makes that possible or likely. Um, I remember well, okay, a friend who was basically a piano teacher, had a student who just really wanted to play guitar, really wanted to play guitar, did not want to play piano. But the parents were like, no, you have to play piano. You can't play guitar until later. And we just thought, well, the danger here is that this person has an obvious interest in music and wants to learn an instrument. But if we're too prescriptive about which instrument, maybe that'll just turn them off. So I would say it's more important to kind of follow that interest and just see where it leads. The pragmatic question would be really, what do you want to do? So if you want to control some motors, maybe to build a robot or to point your telescope, or if you want to take some images from a camera, maybe a Raspberry Pi camera, is that some or a web like a, what do I want to say, a yeah, a webcam? Is that something that you can do in Scratch? Again, I haven't looked at it recently, but when I did look at it, it was pretty cool, and it also is a bit of a different model of computation. I think it's like scheme based or Lisp based, and it can be good to be exposed to that, but it'll be a bit different from C++ or Java or Python. Does that? I guess the answer is it depends what you want to do, but don't hold out for the right language. If you're interested, or the kid is interested, or whomever you're trying to work with or encourage, just let them be interested and do things. There's no right language. And also, by the time I've lost count of how many languages I know, honestly. Like, if you're programming for a while, you just like know a bit. You know a few languages well, and you know a bit about many languages. So it becomes less and less important which specific languages you know. Hopefully, that gives you enough to work with.
That's a great answer. Thank you. We got another question that came in from Morgan Mitchell. What are some ways to introduce astronomy or computing to a child, or any valuable resources that they could use?
Mm-hmm. No, good question. Um, yeah, I mean, this is the kind of from astronomy to computing and back again. I think what brought me back again was probably having kids, right? Um, where you just want to share these things that you're interested with them. They might say that I'm overly prone to make teaching moments, but in any case, um, so for the programming, I think I did look at Scratch many years ago. Um, for astronomy, I mean, really, it's if they can see you, get out there. Like just there's so many YouTube videos. It's almost like there's a wealth of free information, but simply being out there with them, or like, hey, let's go out. Well, yeah, I would say that is a good starting point of just looking up at the sky. I mean, this is one of the beautiful things and almost terrible things about astronomy, right? It in some sense it's one of the sciences or one of the things you could do earliest in history. You can just look up, and my goodness, without light pollution, like imagine what they saw. But it's also these things are so remote, right? Now that we understand actually how far the closest stars are, we're left with this problem that, well, it's so easy to look and see them, and yet realistically, in my lifetime, will I ever travel to another star system? I mean, here's hoping, but we need some advances first. So maybe start small and personal, like, let me do this thing with you. We'll just look up, we'll get some binoculars, and then start to layer on top of that. I've not had great success with my kids when I'm like, here, look at this thing, or here, read about this thing. But they always want to spend more time with me, right? Unless I get too much into teaching moments. You know, Instead of me being hunkered in front of my computer or working, if I'm like, hey, let's go and look at something, that's often a draw in and of itself. And then one can build on that. Um, yeah, I think on the redo of this, we can maybe get to more specifics. But I think they'll rarely be upset if it's just like, hey, come out and look at something with me. Um, yeah,
That's
that's my
great.
answer. That's my rambling answer.
No worries. That was great. Thank you. We got another question that came in from Guy Yanez. I would ask Jaba if he thinks Python is promising for amateur astrophotography pre or post processing.
Oh, okay. Um, yes. So the caveat here is like what I've been doing mostly is just image capture, where I was kind of it's the crossover for me between drone robotics and astronomy. So I was just basically trying to get images through a Raspberry Pi camera to start off with some success. Now I haven't done much processing on those, but having kind of been adjacent to this area, like I've done some video machine learning, I would say that yeah, I mean you've got the tools in Python. You can basically open a Jupyter notebook, or you can. So this is I mean, for the people who haven't seen that, a Jupyter notebook is essentially like an online code editor. You can run it locally, um, but you can execute little bits of code and then have almost documentation and images in between. I mean, for old timers who are kind of more familiar with MATLAB, it's somewhat the same idea. So whatever processing you could do in MATLAB, you can basically do in Python these days. There's a library I was going to mention, OpenCV, Open Computer Vision, which is callable from Python. So whether that's looking for features in the images, whether that's trying to segment images, or even just stack images on top of each other for, I guess, noise reduction. Um, this is really, yeah, that's about all I know about astrophotography. Having always wanting to do it and coming back to doing it now, but yeah, Python definitely has the tools to do image um, enhancement and manipulation. I mean, one thing actually, there's a free software tool. So you could imagine a workflow. There's GIMP, the new image manipulation program, which is basically a free and open source version of Photoshop. But it's also, I believe, scriptable. I'll have to double check that now that I think of it. Thanks for giving me a good idea, actually. So you might be able to script that and actually just tell it to do some image processing rather than having to code it yourself. Hmm. Okay, version
Very
2 of
cool.
the talk. You're giving me ideas.
You actually got a response from one of your previous question askers. This was about the question about introducing astronomy and computing to a child. Morgan just says thank you and that it was very helpful.
Okay, cool.
And that's all the questions we got tonight.
All right. Well, thank you so much, folks, for the questions. I mean, yeah, as I said, you're actually giving me ideas, which is great.
That's
And
great.
also, I mean, thanks to everyone who's put this together. Technically, I know it's been a real struggle, but yeah, stuff happens. So
Well, on that note, stuff has indeed happened this evening. Lots, maybe not as much as we'd hoped, but more than we wanted. And thank you once again to Jaba. We will definitely be having this speaker back on.
cool.
GIMP is one of my favorite little scriptable things, and I'll just recommend to anyone else out there Cyril as well, which is also free. Easy stuff. But there's a lot more we could talk about, so we have to have you back at some point. So viewers, stay tuned to the Rask communication channels, and we will be coming back with another one from this speaker. But for tonight, we should probably wrap it up before anything else fails. So I am going to hand this over to our president of Toronto Centre Rask, Tom Luton. Please finish off this evening.
Okay, thanks, Elena, and thank you to our speaker. And once again, folks, thanks for bearing with us. It's been one of those days. So, fortunately, the announcements are fairly short tonight. So, as Elena was saying earlier, we have two types of meetings here on YouTube when everything works. You've just had one of our speaker nights, and coming up in 2 weeks is one of our recreational astronomy nights. If you're viewing us live, please say hello in the chat, enter a few questions for some presenters. If you're a new member, please introduce yourself. And if you're coming to us from far, far outside the Toronto area, please let us know where you're coming from. Our next recreational astronomy night is on Wednesday, the 2nd of November at 7:30 p.m. Arnold Brody will be discussing the sky this month. Frank Dempsey will be talking about Frank's recent merry-go-round observing project. And Arushi Nath will be giving part 2 of her talk from last month, photometric observations of Didymos asteroid system after the impact, using robotic telescopes, open data sets, and maths. Here live on YouTube. If you'd like to present something, please contact Paul Markov. We're still waiting for details on our next speakers night, which is scheduled for the 16th of November at 7:30 p.m. We'll keep you posted. Just a heads up to members, there's a Toronto Centre Council meeting on Wednesday, October 26th at 7:30 p.m. That's next Wednesday. It's online and members only. Please drop me a note for details if you're interested in joining us and attending. Coming up for our observing sessions, a city star party, Bayview Village Park, during the first clear night of the week of October 31st to November 3rd. Just a reminder, Toronto Centre has restarted most indoor events. We're asking folks to please wear masks, and we're asking folks to keep their health status and comfort level in mind when you decide to take part or not. What this means is DDO and EPO can go ahead with in-person activities. Telescope loan will be resuming as soon as they've completed some maintenance equipment, some equipment maintenance, and meetings at the Science Center will resume as soon as they let us back in, and after AV's had a chance to check over the equipment and have a rehearsal. CAO is the exception. At the moment, we're being a little cautious. So access to CAO facilities by members' families is only in a modified communal fashion with total site occupancy limited to 25 individuals. The upstairs washroom is only for upstairs bookings, with max occupancy for upstairs bedrooms of 2 people from the same family per bedroom for a total of 6 people, with the communal areas limited to 3 people with masks. All CAO users can use both kitchens, the downstairs washroom with masks. Full details are on the website. Please read everything before you make your bookings. We're looking to fill some spots on our job board. We're looking for an education and public outreach chair, a light pollution committee chair, a volunteer committee chair, and a marketing committee chair, and some committee members. The AV committee is always looking for additional help, and the EPO committee is looking for additional members, especially online presenters and anyone who can act as a telescope camera operator for virtual star parties. Just a reminder that to be a volunteer, you first must be a member. So please contact myself, president@rascto.ca, if you'd like to volunteer. Quick plug for Rask membership. You can renew online at secure.rask.ca. And if you would like to talk to the membership department regarding gift memberships or the Rask Emergency Fund, they can be reached at mempub@rask.ca. And with that, I'd like to wish you all a very pleasant night. Thank you very much for joining us. You can follow us on all the forms of social media that we've got listed here. If you're watching us on YouTube live, please like and subscribe and hit the notification bell. Stay safe. Keep looking up. Good night, everyone.